I changed YOLO, or you only live once, to YODO, or you only die once, meaning that you get to live every day. So we have an opportunity to take advantage of every day that we're here. We never know how long we're going to be here, when our time is going to be cut short. If you're not, or if I'm not taking advantage of those days and living them to their fullest, we're missing an opportunity.
Welcome to a new episode of Most Memorable Journeys. Another fascinating guest. They always are, otherwise I wouldn't invite them, but this one has done something really special. He traveled to 7 continents in 1 year. He wrote a book afterwards called Filling My Bucket. And he had to get up very early for this interview because he is in the US and we have a big time difference. But he's here now, and I'm very much looking forward to talking to him. Welcome to Most Memorable Journeys, Cole Sjoholm.
Perfect.
Did I say it right?
You're doing great. How are you this morning, Elizabeth?
I am very well. I'm actually still very hot in Cyprus. We still have summer, but it's getting to the end.
Yeah, I'm excited. I haven't visited Cyprus yet. However, it's booked already for next year, March and April of 2025. I will be there. So
That's so great fun. I'll be here. We'll get together.
yeah, that would be wonderful for sure.
Yes, of course. I mean, Cyprus is not that big. You can't really miss me.
Okay, sounds good.
So, Cole, why? Why did you visit? I'm sure people ask you that all the time. You could have spread this all over, like, I don't know how many years. Why 7 continents in 1 year?
It really was just an opportunity that I saw and I took it. It wasn't planned. I mean, from figuring out I was going to do this to actually booking all the trip, it was the span of 5 days, and I started traveling immediately after that. So it was a little bit impulsive. However, I've always loved to travel. I knew that mortgage origination was going to be slower last year just because of market conditions. And I'd worked really hard and saved up some money over the last several years where it was busier. So I saw this opportunity and I took it, and I figured out how, better to invest in myself and learn about myself than through solo travel.
Oh, I absolutely agree. I think it's definitely the best investment that we can do. But as you say, we still have to finance it, and I think, when you have saved money and then you are able to spend it on you and enjoy it. I think that's when it's even nicer when it hasn't been
Yeah,
given
and I
to
mean,
you, you had to work for it.
I'm not independently wealthy, so I certainly had to work while I was traveling. It was like digital nomad in that way. I was able to still originate mortgage loans while traveling around the world, both through a lot of hard work for myself, but also a team here in Colorado. And it all came together perfectly. I was still a top producing loan officer in my office, and really kind of showed me that you don't have to limit yourself. You really can have it all if you put your mind to it and work hard.
I think that's interesting for people who are listening and people who may want to get in touch with you. We're going to put the links in the show notes, because I'm sure there's plenty of people who, when you were saying that just now, that you did earn money while you were traveling and that it's possible. I think there's going to be people who want to know how you did that.
Absolutely.
Um,
I welcome all
so
those questions and comments and
yeah,
contacts. So please reach out.
they can connect with you on social media, because I'm going to tag you when I post this episode. So, Cole, but did you travel before? When did you start traveling? When did the travel
I
bug
mean,
bite you?
I've always loved to travel from a very young age. My family would take summer vacations, some of that being road trips, trips to Disney World, beach vacations, all sorts of different things. So I was fortunate that way that I was exposed to travel at a young age. And like you've talked about in some of your other episodes, I was open to a world that was much bigger than where I was living at a very young age. And I always knew that travel was important, and just eyes were open to that. Until last year, I honestly had never stepped onto another continent before. I'd been all over the Caribbean and some other places, Canada, Mexico, but I never visited another continent. So visiting all 7 in a year, it's a wild story. It wouldn't change a thing about it. However, I definitely learned a lot and had a great time doing it.
That's amazing, but nobody can blame you. I always say that because I used to be a tour guide in the United States, and the North American continent on its own, you can spend your whole life traveling and you can visit
Mhm.
everything there is. You can visit the desert, the Pacific, the Atlantic, the mountains, anything. So you really don't need to leave if you don't want to. But of course, you were more curious than that. But I know, people sometimes make fun of Americans who never have a passport, but they don't really need one if if they are happy with, because they have everything.
Yeah, I mean, America, the US is a, huge, huge country, and I've been fortunate. I've explored, I think I'm at 46 states now, so I've only got a few states left to explore. Have spent some time in Canada growing up on the northern border of the US, and then have been down to Mexico quite a bit, a little bit of Latin America. So it is very true. However, what I've loved about traveling is how much more I appreciate my hometown beauty than I did when I was living here and just stuck in the mundane part of everyday life. After having traveled so much and seen how beautiful the world is collectively, and then coming back home and getting to reappreciate and re-fall in love with where I get to live every day, it's been a really special part of the process as well.
Definitely. Do you have a favorite state in the United States of America?
State, I mean, I really do love Colorado where I live. I grew up in northern Michigan on Lake Superior, and growing up on the Great Lakes was a really special place to grow up. What I miss about the Midwest is water. Colorado is a very dry state in general. However, what I love about Colorado is our sunshine. We have sunshine more than 300 days of year. Access to outdoor recreation is incredible, and it's a great place to travel from. We have some good flight options and things like that. So it's good. It's home. It's been home for more than 20 years. We'll see what the future holds.
Do you ski?
I do ski. Ironically, I lived about 20 miles outside of Aspen, Colorado for 4 or 5 years and skied a lot when I was living up there. Now that I'm a couple hours away from the ski resorts, I actually haven't skied in a couple of years, which is probably surprising to a lot of people from outside of the world that have access to all of this within an hour or two, and I don't utilize it. However, last year I purposely didn't ski because I didn't want to injure myself and jeopardize some of this travel. So that was a conscious decision. And then a few years prior to that, I was so busy with work during the COVID time and low interest rates that I really didn't have time to do much other than, keep my nose down and just work. So I'm hoping to get back into it again. I'm
You were
actually
busy
thinking that
making money, so you could go and travel.
exactly. I'm actually thinking that skiing on all seven continents might be another
Oh,
trek that I go on. So we'll see what happens.
I agree with you. I actually have one of my things on my bucket list is skiing either I've never skied in the US or in Canada. And another place where apparently skiing is very, very beautiful is Japan.
Exactly. Yep. I was just in Japan. Obviously, it's still summer, and it was much hotter in Japan than I was prepared for. I'd been to Japan previously in November, and it was much cooler, but the humidity in Tokyo in the summertime is overwhelmingly hot.
Really? Well, because Cyprus is the same in July and August. It's just so humid. So, but you're not coming. You said it's May or April, May that you're
Yeah,
coming.
March,
Yes, that's a
April.
good time. Very good time to come. Now, before we started recording, I asked you how to pronounce your family name, and you said it's of Swedish origin. Have you been to Sweden?
I did visit Sweden last year for the first time, and I fell in love with the Scandinavian countries, and it oddly felt like home, even though I had never been there before, and I'm fifth generation American, so I don't really have any ties back to family back in that part of the world. However, a lot of similarities to where I grew up, and I understand why ancestors settled where they did because of those visual similarities and contrast between water and trees and mining and way of life. So there is a lot of similarities that way.
So let's talk about that 2023 year, that famous year where did you start? And did it just can give me a little sort of rundown on the route.
Yeah, so first couple of weeks of January were spent on a cruise ship in the Caribbean. I'd already had a trip booked before this plan came, so I was all over the Caribbean over 14 days. Then I went to San Francisco for the first time in my life, one of those destinations that I'd always wanted to go to. And then my first international trip was to Australia, and that was in March of 2023. Spent several days in Gold Coast, an area south of Brisbane on the beach, and explored there. Then I got on a cruise ship to the South Pacific, New Caledonia, Vanuatu. Came back and went up to the Great Barrier Reef and did a scuba dive there on the reef, and then flew home. I think I was in Australia for about 18 days or so. My next trip wasn't until June, and I spent 25 days in Europe, about a week in Amsterdam, then got on a cruise ship through the Norwegian fjords, and then stayed on that same ship for another 12-day voyage that went to Germany, Estonia, Sweden, Finland, the Netherlands, and yeah, just had a really good time on that. 25 days was the longest trip of my life, and it went by so quickly. I mean, it was shocking how quickly it went by. The visual sights in Northern Europe are just stunning, and I really had a great time. From there, I came back home. I went back and forth a lot from the US because of work obligations. But my next trip was in September, and I went to the Seychelles in Africa. And that was a complete land-based vacation. Stayed at a resort there on the islands and did some island hopping and beach hopping on different excursions. Then I came back home, went to Asia in November, flew home from Asia November 30th, and then I took off for South America and Antarctica 10 days later. So I actually flew home on New Year's Eve of 2023, which is exactly a year after I came up with this plan on New Year's Eve of 2022. And that was planned on purpose. I wanted to be back in my own bed on New Year's Day, 2024, having completed this journey around the world.
That's amazing. I mean, I didn't realize that you were doing it like that. I didn't realize that you went home in between. I thought
Yeah,
it was like a one stretch thing because this actually makes it kind of more fascinating because you had different blocks of traveling. Which one impressed you most?
I would say most impressive is probably Antarctica, just because it is so unique and rare and it's totally unspoiled beauty. As far as places that I can't get enough of, I will go back to Norway. I just was absolutely fell in love with Norway, and it's somewhere that I'd love to live. Certainly go back and visit as much as I can in the future.
Fascinating. I keep hearing that. I keep hearing about Antarctica, and obviously because it's totally unspoiled. And am I right that Antarctica is not a country or it doesn't belong to anybody?
Correct. Yeah, no country stakes claim. There's several different countries that have scientific outposts there, but it's really just governed by this treaty, the IATA treaty, that allows scientists to come there and research different facets of the world. However, it's not claimed by any particular country.
How long did you stay in Antarctica?
The total cruise from Ushuaia to Antarctica and back was 12 nights. And of that, 7 nights were actually spent in and around the peninsula and the continent. We were able to step foot on the continent, I believe, 6 different times out of those 7 nights. So it's very immersive that way. Got to
Yeah,
go
so you
kayaking.
slept on the boat, you slept on the ship.
Correct. Yep. Slept on the ship, used that like a hotel, and then you go out on different excursions. We'd go kayaking, do some hiking. There was actually a submarine on the ship that we got to go and explore underwater in Antarctica, which is pretty fun.
I had a guest who actually organizes these tours, but now I don't remember his name because he also does tours in Galapagos. It may be the same company that you probably not, but because usually these places there are not so many organizers doing these things.
No, it's a pretty small group. I mean, if you're on a large commercial cruise ship, they do also visit Antarctica. But if there's more than 500 passengers on board, you're actually not allowed to like exit the ship and go to the continent. It's just like a visual sail by. I was on an expedition ship that only had about 250 passengers. So we were able to disembark and go out on the continent and do things, which was pretty fun.
So they are protecting it enough that they don't have this masses of people coming at the same time
No,
because
you can't have more than 100 passengers from any vessel on shore at one time.
yeah.
So it's definitely regulated. And I was most surprised with how warm it was there. I actually wore shorts and flip-flops when I was on the deck of the cruise ship. We weren't allowed to do that for protections for the continent and trying to maintain the scientific nature of the continent itself. But it was much warmer than I expected there, which is terrifying, but also it was a big surprise.
For me, thinking of Antarctica is like pure freezing cold. So that's not the case.
No, it wasn't. I mean, when the winds came up, it was definitely very, very cold. But when it was calm and the sun was out, it was absolutely gorgeous. And there was people sunning on the sun deck. And again, I was trouncing around in my shorts and flip-flops, having a grand old time on the ship.
Did you meet any penguins?
I met a whole bunch of penguins, thousands and thousands of them. And that was actually one of the funny takeaways from the year. So many people asked me to, jokingly take one home as a pet or a souvenir. Penguins are incredibly stinky. So they would be a horrible pet, in my opinion, very, very cute to look at. But the stench from the penguins was quite pungent. And it's one of those, memories that you won't ever forget. I'll never forget how the penguins smelt on Antarctica just because it was such a unique experience.
That's amazing. I would imagine. I mean, when you see them in a zoo or when you see them in an aquarium, they don't. No, that's true. They stink, but they are
Mhm.
cute to look at. So
Oh, adorable.
you
But
recommend to look at them on through a screen or
yeah,
through
well,
a
I mean, it was fun to be there in person, and I'm certainly not complaining about the way it smelled there, but it's just one of those things you wouldn't want to take home with you necessarily. You
oh,
take home the memory of it, but maybe not the physical.
but I'll keep my cat.
And perfect.
Tell me, I think I wrote it down, but was it? Did the whole thing include 3 cruises?
Cruised in, I mean, there was land components on every continent, but I cruised in Australia, Europe,
Yeah, three.
in Asia, and
Yeah.
then in Antarctica.
So is that something that you feel if you want to get an idea of many things, a cruise is a good idea?
Yeah, for me, it was really twofold. Number one, it was much more affordable to travel that way than it was to do land-based and hop around and try and deal with all that ground transportation. I enjoy cruising in general, so I'm always an advocate of it. I certainly understand why it's not for everyone, but it worked for me. The second part, and was probably the bigger reason as to why there was so much cruise travel last year, is because I needed to have strong and stable internet connections, and cruise ships often offer Starlink internet. So I was able to do board meetings and client calls in Antarctica, like full video conferencing, and having that known connection was much more important for me to be able to continue to work and travel than it was to experience the world in a different way.
I
So it was
see.
out of necessity, but it definitely worked well.
Yeah, because I wrote down that apart from writing that book, you also have a blog, and that's
Yeah.
like describing your trip. Are there places or which places are the ones that you think, okay, I went here now for a day or for 2 days, but that's not enough. I want to go back to.
Yeah, I had a fortune that I never really visited anywhere that I didn't enjoy. There are certainly places that I enjoyed more and would probably choose to go back to sooner rather than others. But the world is a beautiful place, and I was trying to be open and absorb as much differences and similarities as I could. So the blog was meant to be like a daily diary. And it was a way for me to stay in touch with my friends and family without posting on social media too excessively because it was so much travel and I didn't want to be in people's faces that much. But I wanted to be able to update people that wanted to follow along and, stay in touch with what was going, and a place for me to also post my photography, but also that daily journal where I could also refer back to now that I'm back from this epic year. And I get to relive those days and details that I would have forgot otherwise unless I had the blog. So it's worked out many different ways. Well, I'm glad I did it. There's things I would improve on and maybe do a little bit differently if I were to do it again, but it all came together so quickly. I just went with it and I'm happy with how it turned out.
Oh, I think that when we look back at things, there's always something that we could do better. But maybe at the time when we do it, that's just the best way we know how to do it, and that is totally fine. But I think it's interesting to talk about it and maybe tell somebody who wants to do the same thing, not to make that mistake, that thing that you may have considered a mistake. Now, about the book. When did you write the book then? Because the book is you wrote it after the trip. And it's only 2020. What is it, September 24? Did you write it while you were traveling or when you came home?
Not really. I mean, I started in November, so I still had Asia, South America, and Antarctica to do. But I wrote a few chapters, kind of more about the background of the story before I was done traveling. And then when I got home, I wrote a little bit in January. And then I took a few month break. I started writing again pretty heavily in April. And by the end of May of 2024, I published through Amazon and Barnes and Noble. And it all came together quickly. It's not the biggest book in the world. I think it's around 130 pages, and it's not meant to be a daily diary. I didn't want to replace the blog or publish the blog post separately. So it really is broken up into three different sections, a little bit about the background story and growing up and discovering this love of travel. And then there's a whole chapter devoted to the travel game. I was winning a game I didn't even know that I was really playing, but through brand loyalty and commitment to traveling with certain brands, I got multiple upgrades and you know benefits and hotel rooms and things like that that just really worked in my favor, probably to the tune of about $30,000 for benefits that I didn't pay for because of that loyalty. The second section of the book really goes into the continents and the highlights of the different places that I visited, some different lessons and little anecdotes about the different places I visited. And then the third section of the book is really the takeaway, how you summarize lessons learned and takeaways from that much travel in a single year.
I don't want to give away any secrets because we want people to read the book, but give us one takeaway. What one good takeaway?
Yep. I'd say my biggest and most impactful or profound type of realization is that I changed YOLO, or you only live once, to YODO, or you only die once, meaning that you get to live every day. So we have an opportunity to take advantage of every day that we're here. We never know how long we're going to be here, when our time is going to be cut short. If you're not, or if I'm not taking advantage of those days and living them to their fullest, we're missing an opportunity. And for me, if you only live once, you're missing this huge opportunity to enjoy each and every day. So that was kind of my fun little take on it. I actually tattooed it on my leg. So it's become a huge part of my life.
I'm going to steal that.
Please do.
YOLO. I like that because I use YOLO, but you are right because we live many, 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 many times and we live a lot if we want to. Some people don't.
Exactly. So it's a mind shift, mind change in that way. It's meant to be fun and catchy. So I'm glad that you enjoy it that way as well.
I
But
do. I'm going to steal it and I'm going to post it on social media as soon as we finish this interview. But I will tell people where I got it from.
I appreciate it.
Tell me, how did you come up with the name? It's a beautiful name. It's a beautiful, the name of the book, Filling My Bucket, because basically that's life. That's what we should be doing. Like if you want to use it as a metaphor, we're born, I always say, because I also do life coaching and hypnotherapy, we are born with an empty hard disk, but we're also born with an empty bucket.
Yeah. So when I was traveling back from Australia, again, the first continent, I was on this 15-hour flight from Brisbane to LAX and was writing my next blog post on my phone in my notes. And I started thinking about the bucket list analogy. And I knew just from this one trip and one continent that there was far more sites than I was ever going to get to see in 1 year or my entire life. So how do I make a list and how do I like check things off? And I realized that I was growing from travel. I wasn't like completing things. I wasn't, eliminating things. I was growing. So filling my bucket was a play on the bucket list thought process where I'm growing from the travel and I'm filling my life and my bucket from travel.
Yeah. And as you very, very wisely said before, none of us ever knows when this is over. We die once. One day we will die, all of us. And I think that's one thing that many people don't want to talk about or don't want to think about. And it's one of the most important things to actually think about because it gives you, when you're aware of that, it gives you more motivation to live.
Yeah, I mean, I've made plenty of mistakes in my life. I'm in my 40s now, and I've learned and grown a lot through those, initial decades of my life. But again, saw this opportunity. I took it with no regrets. Again, there's things that I would maybe do differently or things that I would try and fit in that I didn't get to. But it was the most fun year of my life. Grew so much, learned so much about myself. And that's really, because of solo travel. It wasn't all enjoyable. There was plenty of times when it was uncomfortable or I felt lonely. And through work on oneself, you're able to grow and push yourself. And really, the change in love of solo travel happened when I was in Amsterdam in Europe. So my second continent of the year. And I saw a cafe and I wanted to go get a coffee. And I just walked across the street and popped in and ordered this latte, was back out on the street sipping on it, walking down the street. And I realized that was a lot of freedom that I didn't have in other times in my life when I was traveling with other people. And I was able to just hop in there and do it without having to explain to anyone why I wanted to do it or why we were taking a break from our day to do it. And then I realized, that also meant I could sleep in when I wanted to, or if I was awake because of jet lag or whatever, I could get up and start wandering around the city whenever I wanted to. And I didn't have to consult anyone. It was all very selfish, but focused on myself and what I wanted to do. And I now love both forms of travel. I love traveling with friends and partners. I love traveling by myself, and I continue to incorporate both in my life moving forward.
Yeah, I think it's as we say, no matter how thin the slice is, there is always two sides to it, isn't there? What is your tip to somebody who goes traveling on their own for the first time? Because many people are afraid of traveling on their own.
Yeah.
What is a hint?
For me, it's you got to do it, and it's probably going to be uncomfortable to start with. I traveled a lot solo for business prior to this. It was a big mind shift change going from business travel to recreational travel and being solo and not having someone to share it with. It seems very normal in business life to do that, where recreationally it's a little bit less comfortable. But it doesn't have to be some grandiose thing like I did either. Like you can learn a lot about yourself and about solo travel if you just visit the town next door and take yourself to lunch or to dinner or, go on a hike, whatever you want to do. It doesn't have to be grandiose, but it was really great to become comfortable with oneself and realize that you are enough on your own. You don't need other people to complement you in all facets of life. And finding that inner peace has been really, really helpful for me.
I think that's also very empowering to understand that, okay, the people around me, because at the end, we were talking before about that we're all going to die. We will die alone. So, the only person that stays with us until the very end is ourselves.
Mhm.
So if we enjoy our own company, that's a good thing to do, isn't it?
Yeah, and life is certainly enhanced by other people. Those joint shared experiences and laughter and a lot of things of life are social connections. So not downplaying that at all. I love my friends and family and all those connections that I have and have met through this year of travel as well. But being really comfortable with oneself has become really powerful, and I'm proud of that journey.
Yeah, because sometimes I'm in a group on Facebook, which is a ladies group of traveling over ladies over 50 traveling solo. And I read a lot there, and I often read that they are afraid to start and they don't know how to start. But I think it's empowering. And I also think that it helps you realize how precious your friends are. And sometimes
Mhm.
things just don't work out. Sometimes nobody has time to go at that time when you want to go. And I think we should just go alone then and then enjoy another one with a friend the next time, not just depend on people. It shouldn't stop us from doing something.
Well, that was the other thing about cruise travel. Everyone's on holiday and they're all there to have a good time and meet people. Just, ponying up to a bar and starting a conversation with someone is completely normal, especially with cruise travel. So it was, I found friends that had also had this love of travel, and we had that common connection. So it was really easy to build friendships that way. Although I did feel alone, I never felt alone, if that makes sense. I mean, there are certainly times when, having dinner by yourself or whatever was maybe a little bit uncomfortable, but I got to sit there and just see other people live their lives. And that's part of what the photography also came to, if I can touch on that for just a minute. I bought a camera and it became my travel buddy throughout the course of the year. And I fell in love with street photography and capturing candid moments in people's lives. But I also started walking up to people and asking to take their photo in like an unplanned portrait sort of way. And the connections through the camera lens have become such an important part of the journey. It's a new hobby that I've fallen in love with and have been published a few different times in different publications and actually working on a photo book myself right now. So that's my next project.
Because I was going to ask you about the camera. You did you take photographs before, or was this especially for this year of
Yeah, I mean, I just bought the camera December of 2023 as kind of a Christmas present to myself. And then I started traveling in January. I knew that, photography was a good solo hobby. There's only one lens for a reason, is the joke I like to make. So it was just, I knew I had some sort of activity that I could do. And I liked to, take photos when I was growing up, but I hadn't really touched a camera in more than 20 years. So it was fun.
So do you believe that if you want to do this kind of thing, it's better to have a phone is not enough?
It's hard to say. I mean, a photographer will tell you the best camera that you have is the one that's with you. Certainly for the types of images that I took, I do feel that having professional quality equipment certainly enhances the photography itself, but it's a commitment. I mean, my carry-on became my camera equipment. I carried
Mhm.
several different lenses with me and my laptop. So it was a choice, and lugging a camera around with a giant lens is not the most fun thing to do, especially in humid weather or rainy weather. But it was a commitment that I made. It became a great part of the year for me. And it gave me a purpose in a year that otherwise lacked a lot of purpose. I mean, I was wandering around these destinations by myself, so it gave me something to do. And I'm happy with the souvenirs. They really are my souvenirs of the year.
Well, we'll be looking forward to that photo book then.
Yeah, thank you.
When
It's
is it
fun.
when will it be ready?
It's heavy in the process right now. My original date was September 30th to have it released. It's not going to be quite that soon, but in the next 4 to 6 weeks, it should be ready and available.
Excellent, excellent. Now we're already way in, but you have been to all the continents. I read, I think that trip included 25 countries, maybe more.
Yep.
What's left? I mean, what's next? What's on your, how are you going to continue filling that bucket?
Yeah, I just got back from an 18-day cruise that went from Los Angeles up through Alaska, across the international date line, and over to Japan. So that was a really exciting trip to cross the international date line on a cruise ship. September 2nd doesn't exist in my life of 2023. It just disappeared from the calendar.
That's
And then
not
I got
fair.
so
But did you come back the same way? Did you get it back?
like I lived September 13th twice. Friday,
Ah!
September 13th, I lived it for 2 days, which is also kind of fun. But so you do get it back when you travel back across the date line. But next up, I leave in a few weeks on a Panama Canal trip that goes from Seattle to New Orleans, a full traverse of the Panama Canal. And then I have a few different trips planned after that, including this trip to Greece, Turkey, Cyprus in March of next year.
So basically, you discovered that you can have it all, that you can work and travel, and that it's working out for you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's been all sorts of changes in technology that's made it more possible. Certainly, I'm very fortunate to have an employer and a manager that supports me in my dreams and desires. I, in turn, think I've become a more loyal employee and more productive. I actually worked harder last year than I had in a while because I had this focus and goals personally. So it's been a win-win, I think, for everyone involved. At least I hope so. I know it has been for me.
Yeah, I think I've noticed that many times in my life as well. I remember there was a time when I was working part-time, and I was grateful for working part-time because it's not common here in Cyprus. And I believe that in those few hours, I worked a lot more than those people who were working full-time because I was given the opportunity to do something that I wanted that helped me make my life easier because I had a small child. And I think many employers don't realize that how important it is to have happy staff.
Yeah, I mean, it very, very important. I think it takes the right person. I think there's plenty of people that aren't able to stay focused without that sort of daily interaction or whatever. there's different jobs for different reasons, and people are attracted to different parts of different, industries. So there's a time and place for everything. But I know for me, I'm very, very thankful that I was able to do that and am continuing able to do that.
Fantastic. Well, anything else? Have we forgotten anything? I've going through my notes. I think we touched on everything that I wanted to speak to you about. But I am now looking forward to meeting you next year.
I know we'll definitely have to stay in touch. And then likewise, I only live an hour or two away from several different ski resorts in Colorado. So if you're ever over this way,
You think maybe my dream will actually come true one day?
Let's make it happen.
All right, we'll talk about it when you're here.
Sounds wonderful. And thank you again so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for being on Most Memorable Journeys today.
Yeah, congratulations on all your success and keep on recording.
Thank you. If you enjoy my podcast, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. You will find all the information in the show notes.